My name is Mabel Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my own son would throw me out of his house just weeks after my retirement party. After 42 years of teaching elementary school children and pinching pennies, Howard thought I was just a burden with nothing but a small pension. What he didn't know was that beneath my modest appearance lay a seven-figure fortune I'd built slowly over decades. The day his financial world came crashing down and he learned the truth about my wealth, everything changed in ways neither of us expected. If you're watching this video, please let me know where you're viewing from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this shocking family drama unfolded. I grew up in a tiny town called Pinewood in northern Minnesota, where everyone knew everyone and nobody had much money to spare. My parents, hardworking folks who lived through the Great Depression, taught me the value of every dollar earned. Daddy worked at the local lumber mill, and Mama took in sewing to help make ends meet. We weren't poor by local standards, but there were plenty of nights when dinner was nothing but potato soup and homemade bread. Money doesn't grow on trees, Mabel Jean, my father would say whenever I asked for something new. You want something, you save for it. Those words stuck with me. When I turned 14, I got my first job stacking shelves at Gunderson's General Store after school. Every penny I earned went into an old coffee can, except for 20% that I put aside in a savings account at the local bank. Mr. Gunderson, seeing my dedication, would sometimes slip me an extra $1, saying, "This one's for your future, Mabel." By 18, I had saved enough to help with my college education at the state university. Unlike many of my classmates who spent weekends partying, I worked 3 jobs, shelving books at the library, waitressing at a diner near campus, and tutoring struggling students in English and mathematics. I graduated without a dime of debt, something almost unheard of even back then. It was during my junior year that I met Frank Thompson. He wasn't like the other boys who tried to impress girls with flashy cars or expensive dates. Frank worked his way through engineering school and shared my philosophy about money. On our first date, when he suggested we split the bill at the coffee shop, I knew he was different. Some might have found it unromantic, but to me, it showed responsibility. I'd rather save for something real than waste money trying to impress you, he told me honestly. I fell in love with his practical mind almost as much as his kind heart. We married the summer after graduation in a simple ceremony in my parents' backyard. Instead of an expensive honeymoon, we put a down payment on a small starter home in a modest neighborhood. Frank got a job at an engineering firm, and I began teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. Even with 2 incomes, we maintained our frugal lifestyle. We packed lunches, drove used cars, and limited eating out to special occasions. Every month, we automatically transferred 20% of our combined income into savings and investments. Frank had studied the stock market as a hobby and taught me the fundamentals of long-term investing. It's not about getting rich quick, he would explain while showing me charts and prospectuses at our kitchen table. It's about being patient and consistent. When our son Howard was born 3 years later, we were financially prepared. I took a year off from teaching without worrying about money because we had planned for it. Frank and I dreamed of raising a child who understood the value of hard work and financial responsibility. We wanted Howard to have more opportunities than we'd had, but also to appreciate what it took to create security. Life was proceeding according to plan until Howard turned 10. Frank had been complaining of headaches for weeks, but brushed them off as stress from a big project at work. One evening, he collapsed in our living room. The diagnosis was devastating: an aggressive, brain tumor. Within 6 months, I was a widow, at 38, with a 10-year-old son to raise alone. The life insurance policy Frank had insisted upon gave us enough to pay off our mortgage and set aside college money for Howard. Many people might have upgraded their lifestyle with such a windfall, but I knew that money needed to last. Instead of moving or changing our lives dramatically, I continued teaching and maintaining our frugal household. That's when I began my serious investment strategy. With Frank gone, I educated myself thoroughly about personal finance. I read every book I could find, attended free investment seminars, and eventually hired a fee-only financial advisor who respected my cautious approach. I lived solely on my teaching salary and invested Frank's insurance money in a diversified portfolio of index funds, bonds, and eventually rental properties. As Howard grew into his teenage years, I noticed him developing very different ideas about money than what Frank and I had tried to instill. He became increasingly conscious of brands, comparing our modest home to his friends' larger houses, and complaining about our practical vehicles. "Mom, why can't we get a new car? Jeff's parents just bought a Cadillac," he would whine. "We don't need a new car, Howard. Ours runs perfectly fine, and it's paid for," I'd explain. "But we look poor." He'd counter the word poor, coming out like it was the worst thing imaginable. These conversations became more frequent as he entered high school. Despite my attempts to teach him about compound interest, emergency funds, and living below your means, Howard seemed determined to equate spending with success. He wanted the expensive sneakers, the trendy clothes, and later, the flashy car. I compromised where I could. For his 16th birthday, instead of the new sports car he coveted, I helped him buy a reliable used sedan, with the agreement that he would pay for half through his part-time job at the mall. He grudgingly accepted, but frequently commented on how his friends' parents were more generous. What Howard never knew was that while we lived modestly, my investments were growing significantly. By the time he entered his senior year of high school, my net worth had already surpassed $500,000. But I saw no reason to share this information with my increasingly materialistic son. Instead, I continued trying to guide him toward financial wisdom, hoping he would eventually understand. The biggest conflict came when it was time for college. Howard had set his sights on an expensive private university across the country, with annual costs nearly 4 times what the state university would charge. "I've saved enough to pay for your education at State University without loans," I told him. "You could graduate completely debt-free." "State is for people who can't get in anywhere better," he argued. "Everyone who matters is going to Westmore. I can take out loans." Howard starting adult life with that kind of debt is a terrible idea. It will follow you for decades. But he wouldn't listen. At 18, he took out substantial student loans against my advice and headed to Westmore University to study finance, ironically enough. I continued sending care packages and supporting him emotionally, hoping that his education would eventually help him see the financial trap he was creating for himself. It was during his sophomore year at Westmore that Howard met Diane Lewis, a marketing major from a wealthy Connecticut family. From the first time he mentioned her name, I could hear the shift in his voice. She represented everything he aspired to: connections, luxury, and social status. When I finally met Diane during spring break, my concerns deepened. She was beautiful and polite, but clearly uncomfortable in our modest home. She picked at the homemade meal I'd prepared and made subtle comments about the quaint neighborhood. I tried to connect with her, but our values seemed worlds apart. "Your son has such potential," she told me as if Howard wasn't in the room. "He's going to be very successful." The way she said successful made it clear that in her mind, success had a specific look: expensive suits, luxury cars, and exclusive addresses. Not the quiet financial security I had built through patience and restraint. By graduation, Howard and Diane were engaged. They planned an extravagant wedding that I offered to contribute to within reason. When Howard scoffed at my proposed budget, calling it embarrassingly small, I realized how wide the gap between our values had grown. "Mom, this is the most important day of our lives," he insisted. "We can't cut corners." "There's a difference between cutting corners and being sensible," I tried to explain. "Starting a marriage with massive debt isn't romantic, it's stressful." But Howard and Diane went ahead with their lavish plans, adding wedding expenses to their already substantial student loans. I attended the beautiful ceremony with mixed emotions: joy for my son's happiness, but concern for the financial house of cards they were building. As I watched Howard start his adult life, I continued quietly growing my own wealth. By my 50th birthday, my investment portfolio had crossed the $1 million mark. Though I still drove the same car and lived in the same modest home where Howard had grown up, I found joy in security, not luxury, a concept my son seemed unable to grasp. After Howard and Diane's wedding, they moved to Chicago, where Howard had secured a position at a prestigious financial firm. The irony wasn't lost on me that my son had chosen a career advising others about money while making questionable financial choices in his own life. Still, I was proud of his professional accomplishments and hoped that maturity might eventually align his personal financial habits with his professional knowledge. For the first few years, our relationship consisted mainly of holiday phone calls and occasional visits. During these brief connections, Howard would enthusiastically describe their life in Chicago, the upscale neighborhood, the networking events, and the important people they were meeting. What he never mentioned were the details of their financial situation, though I suspected their lifestyle far exceeded even his substantial starting salary. When I visited them for the first time, I was shocked by their luxurious apartment with its panoramic view of Lake Michigan. The furnishings were clearly designer pieces, and Diane greeted me wearing jewelry that I recognized as significantly expensive. During that weekend visit, they insisted on taking me to restaurants where entrees cost more than I typically spent on groceries for an entire week. "Howard, this is too extravagant," I whispered when he ordered a $100 bottle of wine at dinner. "Mom, please," he replied with visible embarrassment. "This is normal for us. I can afford it." I didn't argue further, but I noticed he paid with a credit card, not cash. Throughout the weekend, I saw numerous small signs of financial overextension. The way Diane changed the subject when I asked about their retirement savings, the stack of designer shopping bags in their guest room closet, the casual mentions of their next exotic vacation. 3 years into their marriage, Howard called with exciting news: Diane was pregnant. 7 months later, I flew to Chicago to meet my first grandchild, Jessica. Holding that tiny baby girl in my arms, I felt a renewal of hope for our family's future. Perhaps parenthood would shift Howard's priorities toward longer-term thinking. A year and a half later, their son Tyler was born, making me a grandmother twice over. I treasured each visit with my grandchildren, though these occasions were less frequent than I wished. Chicago was a 6-hour drive from my home, and Howard and Diane's busy social calendar made scheduling difficult. "You should just fly, Mom," Howard would say, when I mentioned the long drive. "It's so much easier." What he didn't understand was that I could easily afford to fly, but chose to drive as part of my lifelong habit of thoughtful spending. These were the small choices that had helped build my fortune while living on a teacher's salary. When Jessica was 4 and Tyler 2, Howard called with big news. "Mom, we've bought a house," he announced proudly. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms in Lake Forest. It's the perfect neighborhood for the kids. Lake Forest was one of Chicago's most exclusive suburbs, known for its multi-million-dollar homes and elite private schools. I congratulated him, but couldn't help asking, "That sounds expensive, Howard. Are you sure it's within your budget?" There was a pause before he responded with a touch of irritation. "I'm the financial expert, Mom. I think I know what I can afford." When I visited their new home, I was stunned by its grandeur. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, a gourmet kitchen with appliances that cost more than my car, and a backyard with a built-in pool and professional landscaping. It was beautiful, but felt more like a showpiece than a family home. During that visit, I noticed something concerning. Despite their apparent wealth, there were subtle signs of financial strain. Howard checked his phone nervously. When credit card declined at a restaurant, he quickly produced another. Diane mentioned having to move some things around to pay for a home repair. And one evening, I overheard them arguing about accounts being maxed out. Meanwhile, my own financial situation continued to strengthen. I had paid off my modest home years ago, and my investment portfolio had grown significantly through careful management and compound growth. I now had substantial rental income from 3 properties I'd purchased over the years, in addition to my teacher's salary and investment returns. All of this was completely unknown to Howard, who still saw me as his financially unsophisticated mother, who had only a teacher's salary to live on. Our family gatherings became increasingly strained as the values gap widened. Howard and Diane would talk about their country club membership, private schools for the children, and luxury vacations, while I shared stories about my community garden project or the adult education classes I taught for free at the local library. They listened politely, but with visible disinterest. "Mom still lives like money is scarce," Howard once commented to Diane when he thought I couldn't hear. "I've tried to tell her she could enjoy life more if she'd just spend a little on herself." What hurt most was watching my grandchildren absorb their parents' values. By the time Jessica was 7, she was already brand conscious, turning up her nose at perfectly good clothing because it lacked the right label. Tyler at 5 expected a new toy with every visit to the store. My gentle attempts to discuss gratitude and moderation with the children were often undermined by Howard and Diane. "Grandma grew up in different times," Diane would explain dismissively. "Things are different now." During one summer visit, I tried to introduce the concept of saving to Jessica by offering to match any money she saved from her allowance. Howard interrupted. "Jessica doesn't need to worry about saving right now. We want her to have everything we didn't have as kids." "That's not the point," I tried to explain. "Learning to save isn't about deprivation. It's about making choices and understanding value." Howard rolled his eyes. "Mom, please don't try to turn my kids into penny pinchers. We're doing fine." But were they really? Each visit revealed new luxury purchases alongside new signs of financial stress. Howard's drinking increased noticeably, and Diane seemed perpetually anxious, despite her careful makeup and designer clothes. Their arguments, though, conducted in hushed tones, became more frequent. I continued my simple life, back home teaching by day and carefully managing my growing wealth by night. By the time I reached my early 60s, my investment portfolio had grown to 7 figures, providing me with more security than I had ever dreamed possible on a teacher's salary. The power of compound interest, consistent saving, and prudent investing had created abundance that I kept private, seeing no need to advertise my financial success. As my planned retirement approached, Howard began making concerning comments about my financial future. "Mom, have you really thought about how you're going to manage on just your pension?" he asked during a phone call. "Teacher pensions aren't exactly generous." "I've been planning for retirement my whole career, Howard," I assured him. "I'll be fine." "But you've always lived paycheck to paycheck," he persisted. "Retirement is expensive, especially health care." I nearly laughed at his assumption. I had never lived paycheck to paycheck, not even in my earliest teaching days. But I'd allowed him to believe that my modest lifestyle was my only option, rather than my conscious choice. Perhaps that had been a mistake. "I appreciate your concern," I told him, "but I've saved carefully. I won't be a burden to you." "It's not about being a burden, Mom," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of." Little did I know that this conversation was the beginning of a plan that would ultimately lead to one of the most painful chapters of my life, but also to a long overdue reckoning between my son and me. After 42 years of shaping young minds, my retirement day finally arrived. Lincoln Elementary threw me a beautiful party with current and former students returning to wish me well. Colleagues presented me with a memory book filled with photos and letters from hundreds of children I'd taught over the decades. Standing in that decorated gymnasium, surrounded by the fruits of my life's work, I felt both accomplished and slightly adrift. "What will you do with all your free time, Mrs. Thompson?" asked one of my current students, a bright-eyed girl named Zoe. "I'm going to garden, more volunteer at the library, and maybe travel a little," I told her, though in truth, I was still adjusting to the idea of unstructured days after decades of bell schedules and lesson plans. Howard and his family couldn't attend my retirement party due to a scheduling conflict involving Tyler's soccer tournament. I understood that children's activities were important, but I couldn't help feeling disappointed that my only son wasn't present for this milestone. He did send a lovely flower arrangement, though the card was clearly written by the florist. 2 weeks after my retirement, I was settling into a new rhythm of life. I joined a morning walking group, signed up to volunteer at the community garden, and was researching a trip to the national parks I'd always wanted to visit. My financial advisor had confirmed what I already knew. With my pension, Social Security, rental income, and substantial investment portfolio, I could live quite comfortably for the rest of my life, even accounting for inflation and potential healthcare costs. The doorbell rang on a sunny Tuesday afternoon while I was planning my garden expansion. To my surprise, Howard stood on my porch, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in my modest neighborhood. "Howard, what a wonderful surprise." I hugged him tightly, genuinely delighted by this unexpected visit. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I would have prepared something special." "It was a last-minute decision," he said, stepping into the living room and glancing around with what seemed like a critical eye. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Over coffee at my kitchen table, Howard revealed the purpose of his visit. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about your situation now that you're retired. My situation, I echoed, confused by his choice of words. Yes, this house is too big for you to maintain alone. The stairs could become dangerous as you get older, and living on a fixed income is going to be challenging. I started to correct his assumptions, but decided to hear him out first. Diane and I have been talking, he continued, and we think we have the perfect solution. You should sell this house while the market is strong and come live with us in Lake Forest. The offer caught me completely off guard. Move to Chicago, leave my home, my friends, my community. Howard leaned forward, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. Mom, be practical. Your pension won't stretch as far as you think. Healthcare costs alone could wipe out your savings if something goes wrong. I appreciate your concern, Howard, but I'm quite comfortable financially. I tried to explain, without revealing too much. I've saved and invested throughout my career. He dismissed this with a wave of his hand. Teacher savings aren't going to cover decades of retirement. Trust me, I do this for a living. For the next hour, Howard outlined his plan in detail. I would sell my outdated home, which he assured me would fetch a good price in the current market. I would move into their spacious guest suite, which had its own bathroom and sitting area. I could help with the grandchildren, perhaps drive them to activities, or help with homework, relieving some of the pressure on Diane. And the money from your house sale could be invested properly, he added in a tone that suggested my own investment skills were questionable. I know people who could get you better returns than whatever basic savings account you've been using. As he spoke, I had the uncomfortable feeling that this plan benefited Howard far more than it benefited me. Still, I couldn't dismiss the appeal of being closer to my grandchildren during their formative years. I'd like to think about it, Howard, I said finally. It's a big decision. What's to think about? He pressed. You'll save on living expenses, be close to family, and we'll make sure your house money grows. It's win-win. Still, it's my home of 30 years. I need a little time. Howard stayed overnight, sleeping in his childhood bedroom that I'd converted to a guest room years ago. Over breakfast, he continued his campaign, showing me photos of their guest suite and pictures of the grandchildren's activities I could participate in. Jessica's taking ballet now, and Tyler's soccer team is really competitive. You'd get to see all their performances and games, he said, showing me photos on his phone. Right now, you're missing everything. That comment struck a painful chord. I did miss my grandchildren terribly and wished I could be more present in their lives. Perhaps this arrangement, despite my reservations, could bridge the distance that had grown between us. Let me talk to my financial advisor first, I insisted. And I'd like to visit for a week to see how it might work before making any decisions. Howard agreed reluctantly to this compromise, though he seemed eager to move forward more quickly. Before leaving, he mentioned casually, the guest suite needs some updating before you move in. Nothing major, just new carpeting and some paint. The money from your house sale could cover that easily. That comment raised a red flag, but I pushed the concern aside. Surely my son wouldn't be suggesting this move for financial gain. This was about family connection, wasn't it? The visit to Chicago the following month was enlightening, though not in the way Howard had hoped. While the guest suite was indeed nice, I quickly realized I would have little privacy or independence in their household. Diane had already planned a schedule of grandma duties, including regular childcare and meal preparation. Howard repeatedly brought up the subject of my house sale, asking pointed questions about its value and when I planned to list it. Most concerning was an overheard conversation between Howard and Diane late one night as I was returning from the kitchen with a glass of water. Once her house sells, we can finally pay off those credit cards and the second mortgage, Howard was saying in a hushed tone. It should be at least $300,000. And the school tuition is due next month, Diane added. This couldn't have come at a better time. I froze in the hallway, the reality of their intention hitting me like a physical blow. They weren't concerned about my well-being in retirement. They wanted access to what they assumed was my only significant asset, my home's equity. Despite this disturbing revelation, I found myself agreeing to their plan the following day. The pull of being near my grandchildren overpowered my misgivings. Perhaps I reasoned this arrangement could still work if I maintained some financial independence. I wouldn't hand over the entire proceeds from my house sale, despite what Howard seemed to expect. Within 2 months, my house was sold, my belongings were packed or stored, and I moved into the guest suite at Howard and Diane's Lake Forest mansion. The initial welcome was warm, with the grandchildren excited about having Grandma permanently in residence. Howard seemed pleased with himself for solving my retirement problem, as he put it. The first cracks appeared when the proceeds from my house sale were deposited into my account. The amount was substantial, $340,000, for the home I'd paid off decades ago. Howard immediately suggested I transfer the funds to an investment account he would manage. I'll need most of that for my own expenses and future plans, I told him firmly. I'm happy to discuss investing a portion of it with your guidance, but the majority needs to remain under my control. His expression darkened. Mom, we've made significant changes to accommodate you. The suite renovations alone cost nearly $20,000. We assumed you'd contribute to household expenses. I'm happy to pay reasonable rent for my suite, I offered, and to help with groceries, since I'll be eating meals here. But the bulk of my house money is for my future security. This conversation set the tone for an increasingly strained arrangement. Diane became cooler toward me frequently, commenting on the inconvenience of having another person in their home. The grandchildren's initial excitement faded as their parents limited our interaction, suddenly insisting that Grandma needs her rest. Or, Grandma isn't here to be your entertainer. Howard began making pointed comments about financial matters in my presence. These property taxes are killing us, he would say, while reviewing bills, or Jessica's dance classes are so expensive. But what can you do when your child has talent? The situation deteriorated over 3 uncomfortable months. My role shifted from welcomed family member to unwanted burden with alarming speed. The final breaking point came during a dinner party Howard and Diane hosted for his colleagues. I had remained in my suite as requested, only emerging to get a book I'd left in the family room. Howard's mother is living with us now, I overheard Diane telling a guest with a theatrical sigh. It's challenging, but what choice did we have? Teachers' pensions are practically nothing these days. At least she had some equity in her home, Howard added, though less than we hoped. I retreated to my room, hurt beyond words by their characterization of our arrangement. The next morning, I approached Howard about finding my own apartment nearby. That would be financial suicide, Mom, he argued. Rents around here are astronomical. You'd burn through your house money in a few years. Nevertheless, I think it would be best for everyone, I insisted. If you feel that way, maybe you should return to Minnesota, he snapped. We rearranged our lives for you, and now you want to leave after 3 months. The conversation escalated quickly. Howard, frustrated by my refusal to hand over more money from my house sale, finally revealed his true feelings. We've got expenses. You can't even imagine, Mom. Private school tuition, the country club membership property taxes on this place. We need that money more than you do. You could live comfortably enough on your pension if you weren't so stubborn about having your own place. That money is my security, Howard, I said quietly. I worked my entire life for it. Your security, he scoffed. What about your family? What about your grandchildren's future? Is your stubbornness more important than their education? Diane joined the argument, her carefully maintained poise cracking. We've done everything to make you comfortable here, Mabel. We renovated the suite, included you in family activities, and you repay us with selfishness. The argument reached its painful climax when Howard, red-faced and frustrated, finally shouted, "If you can't be a contributing member of this household, maybe you should leave. Go back to your precious independence if it's so important. See how far your pension gets you without our help." The silence that followed his outburst was deafening. My own son had just thrown me out of his home. Jessica and Tyler stood frozen in the doorway, witnesses to their father's cruelty toward their grandmother. "I'll pack my things," I said quietly, my heart breaking, not just for myself, but for what my grandchildren had just witnessed. "Mom, I didn't mean," Howard began, perhaps realizing he'd gone too far. "Yes, you did," I interrupted, "and it's better that the truth is finally out in the open." I spent that night packing my essential belongings, tears streaming down my face as I folded clothes and wrapped the few personal items I'd brought. Neither Howard nor Diane came to apologize or check on me. The next morning, I called a taxi to take me to a hotel, refusing Howard's belated offer to drive me. "I'll send for the rest of my things once I'm settled somewhere," I told him at the door. "Mom, you're overreacting," he tried, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "No, Howard, for the first time in our relationship, I'm seeing things exactly as they are." As the taxi pulled away from the mansion my son had purchased but couldn't truly afford, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and liberation. The family I had sacrificed for had rejected me, but perhaps now I could finally live authentically without hiding my financial success or compromising my values. The taxi dropped me at the Lakeside Hotel, a mid-range establishment near downtown Lake Forest. As I checked in for what I expected would be a short stay, the full weight of what had just happened descended upon me. My own son had kicked me out of his home, not because I was difficult to live with, or because we had irreconcilable differences, but because I wouldn't give him my money. In the privacy of my hotel room, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. I sobbed into a pillow, mourning not just the immediate rejection, but the years of misunderstanding and value differences that had led to this moment. Where had I gone wrong in raising Howard? Had my attempts to teach financial responsibility somehow backfired, creating the opposite effect? Or was this the influence of our materialistic society, too powerful for my modest example to counter? After crying until I had no tears left, I did what I always did in times of crisis. I made a plan. First, I needed a temporary place to stay while I figured out my next steps. I called Susan Williams, a former teaching colleague who had retired to Chicago's northern suburbs a few years before me. Susan had always been more than a coworker. She was a true friend who understood my values and life choices. "Mabel, of course, you can stay with me," she said immediately upon hearing a condensed version of my situation. "My guest room is yours for as long as you need it." Susan lived in a comfortable condo in Evanston, about 20 miles from Howard's Lake Forest mansion. She picked me up from the hotel the next morning, her warm hug providing the first real comfort I'd felt since the explosive argument. "I can't believe Howard would treat you this way," she said as we drove to her home. "After everything you've done for him." "I've been trying to understand it myself," I admitted. "I think money troubles make people act in ways they normally wouldn't." Susan's guest room was small, but welcoming, with a window overlooking a community garden that reminded me of home. Over the next few days, she gave me the space to process my emotions while providing quiet companionship when I needed it. After a week of reflection, I decided it was time to contact my financial advisor back in Minnesota. James Peterson had managed my investments for nearly 20 years and understood my financial situation completely. I explained what had happened with Howard and my current homeless state. "I'm so sorry about your family situation, Mabel," James said sincerely. "But from a financial standpoint, you have nothing to worry about. You're in an extremely strong position." We scheduled a video call for the following day to review my portfolio in detail. Susan lent me her home office for privacy, and as James walked me through my current financial status, I felt a renewed appreciation for the decades of careful planning that now gave me complete freedom. "Your current net worth is just over $2.3 million, James explained, sharing his screen to show me the details. "That's not including the proceeds from your house sale or your teacher's pension. With your current asset allocation and withdrawal strategy, you could live very comfortably for the rest of your life, even accounting for inflation and potential healthcare costs." "What about buying a new place here in Chicago?" I asked. "Real estate is much more expensive here than back home. Even in the Chicago market, you could purchase a very nice condo outright for cash and still have plenty left for living expenses," he assured me. "In fact, given current interest rates, it might be the perfect time to consider a real estate purchase." Armed with this confirmation of my financial security, I began researching housing options in the Chicago area. I wanted to remain relatively close to my grandchildren, hoping that over time, some relationship could be salvaged. After exploring several neighborhoods, I focused on Evanston, where Susan lived. It offered an intellectual atmosphere thanks to Northwestern University, good public transportation, and housing prices that, while high by Minnesota standards, were well within my means. I contacted a real estate agent specializing in properties for seniors and spent 2 weeks viewing condominiums in well-maintained buildings. Eventually, I found the perfect match, a 2-bedroom condo in a secure building with a community room, small fitness center, and rooftop garden. The location was ideal, within walking distance of shops, restaurants, and the lake. At $875,000, it was the most expensive purchase I'd ever made, but James confirmed it was a sound investment that still left my financial future secure. Throughout this process, Howard made no attempt to contact me. I received one text message from Diane asking where to send the rest of my belongings, but otherwise, silence. The grandchildren sent crayon drawings delivered by mail with no note from their parents. I cherished these small connections, hanging the artwork in my new home once I moved in. The condo purchase and move happened quickly. Within a month of being kicked out of Howard's home, I was settled in my own beautiful space, decorated with a mix of items from my Minnesota home that had been in storage and new pieces that reflected this new chapter in my life. For the first time, I allowed myself a few tasteful luxuries: a truly comfortable mattress, good quality kitchen equipment, and original artwork by local artists. Susan introduced me to her circle of friends, many of them retired educators like ourselves. I joined a book club signed up for Tai Chi classes at the community center, and volunteered as a reading tutor at a nearby elementary school. Gradually, I built a new life that felt authentic and fulfilling. Still, there was a Howard-shaped hole in my heart. I missed my son despite his behavior. I missed my grandchildren desperately. On particularly difficult days, I would look at family photos and wonder if there was anything I could have done differently, any way I could have prevented this painful estrangement. 3 months passed without contact. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my phone rang with Howard's number on the screen. My heart raced as I answered, unsure what to expect. "Mom," his voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course, Howard. I always have time for you." Despite everything, this was true. I'm in a bit of a situation," he began awkwardly. "Actually, a serious situation. The company had major layoffs last month, and my position was eliminated." I felt a surge of genuine concern. "Oh, Howard, I'm so sorry." "That must be very stressful. It's worse than just losing the job." He continued, his voice dropping. "We were already having financial problems, and now, well, we're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is threatening foreclosure." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't a reconciliation call. It was a financial emergency call. Still, it was contact, a potential opening to rebuild some kind of relationship. "That sounds very difficult," I said carefully. "How are Diane and the children handling it?" "Diane's trying to find work, but she hasn't had a job since before Jessica was born. The kids don't fully understand yet." He paused before continuing with obvious difficulty. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask after how I treated you, but I'm desperate. Would you consider helping us temporarily, just until I find another position?" "I'd like to meet and discuss this in person," I said finally. "There's a cafe near my new place. Could you meet me there tomorrow?" "You have a new place?" he asked, sounding surprised. "Where?" "I bought a condo in Evanston," I told him. "I've been here for about 2 months now." "You bought a condo in Evanston." The confusion in his voice was evident. "How did you afford that on your pension?" "We have a lot to talk about, Howard. Tomorrow at 2. He agreed, and I spent the rest of the day preparing for what would likely be a difficult conversation. I contacted James for updated financial information and thought carefully about what kind of help I was willing to offer and what conditions needed to be attached. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, selecting a quiet table in the corner that would afford us some privacy. I had dressed with particular care in a well-tailored pantsuit I'd recently purchased, a subtle but significant departure from the budget-conscious clothing Howard was accustomed to seeing me wear. When Howard entered the cafe, I barely recognized him. In just 3 months, he seemed to have aged years. His face was haggard, his previously immaculate appearance now slightly disheveled. The designer watch and cufflinks were noticeably absent. His eyes widened as he approached, taking in my appearance and the setting. "Mom, you look different." 3 months is a long time, I replied, standing to embrace him, despite our difficult parting. Whatever had happened between us, he was still my son. We ordered coffee, and Howard immediately launched into a detailed account of his financial disaster. The company restructuring had eliminated his entire department with minimal severance. Their mortgage payment, already stretched thin, became impossible without his income. Credit cards were maxed out, and Diane's parents, whom he'd also approached for help, were facing their own health-related financial challenges. The kids are the ones I'm really worried about, he confessed. They've only known this lifestyle. The thought of pulling them out of their school, away from their friends, it would devastate them. And Diane, I asked gently. She's struggling. This isn't what she signed up for. The implication hung in the air. Their marriage was being tested by this reversal of fortune. Throughout his explanation, I noticed Howard glancing curiously at my clothes, my new phone on the table, and the quality leather handbag beside me. When the bill came for our coffee, I paid with a premium credit card that clearly surprised him. "Mom, how are you affording all this?" he finally asked directly. "The condo, these clothes. I thought you were living on your pension." The moment had arrived. "Howard, there's something I need to explain. Something I probably should have shared years ago." Over the next hour, I revealed the truth about my financial situation. I explained how Frank and I had started investing even before his death, how I'd continued the practice throughout my teaching career, and how compound growth had turned decades of modest, consistent investing into substantial wealth. With your father's life insurance, my savings, and careful investing, I've built a portfolio currently valued at over $2 million. I explained, showing him a simplified version of my financial statement on my tablet. Howard stared at the screen in disbelief, then back at me, his expression cycling through confusion, shock, and finally, a dawning comprehension. "You're wealthy. All this time." "I'm financially independent," I corrected gently. "I wouldn't call myself wealthy by today's standards, but yes, I have significant resources." "But you always lived so frugally, modestly." "Those were choices, Howard, not limitations. Living below my means is what created this security." The irony of our situation wasn't lost on either of us. The financial advisor was facing bankruptcy, while his supposedly financially naive mother had built a 7-figure portfolio on a teacher's salary. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, a note of accusation in his voice. "At first, because I wanted you to develop your own healthy relationship with money, not be influenced by knowing there was family wealth," I explained. "Later, because our values around money became so different that I feared you might see me only as a source of funds rather than as your mother." "Like I did 3 months ago," he admitted, dropping his gaze to the table. "We both made mistakes, Howard. I should have been more transparent with you about finances as you grew older, and perhaps my extreme frugality pushed you in the opposite direction." Howard was quiet for a long moment before asking the question I knew was inevitable. "Will you help us?" "I want to help you and the children," I said carefully. "But just giving you money to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle wouldn't be truly helpful. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here." Howard reluctantly agreed to complete financial transparency, including a detailed accounting of their debt expenses and assets. We agreed to meet again the following week with all the information. As we parted outside the cafe, he hugged me awkwardly. "I'm sorry, Mom, for what I said, for how I treated you. I was wrong." "I know, Howard. We'll figure this out together." As I watched my son walk to his still expensive, but now financially crushing car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for his current struggles, hope for our healing relationship, but also a quiet vindication. The financial principles I had lived by all my life, the ones Howard had rejected as outdated and unnecessary, were proving their value in the most dramatic way possible. The truth about my hidden fortune was finally out, and with it, the possibility of a more honest relationship with my son. Whether this crisis would truly change Howard's fundamental values remained to be seen, but it had certainly shattered the illusion that financial security could be achieved through appearances rather than substance. The week between our cafe meeting and our scheduled financial discussion was busy for both of us. Howard gathered the financial documents I'd requested while I consulted with James about various ways to help my son's family without enabling the financial behaviors that had created their crisis. When Howard arrived at my condo for our next meeting, I could see he was impressed despite himself. The building's elegant lobby, with its doorman and security features, the well-maintained elevator, and finally, my unit itself, with its modern kitchen, spacious living area, and stunning view of the city skyline from the balcony, all challenged his perception of me as financially unsophisticated. "This is really nice, Mom," he said, looking around with new eyes. "Much nicer than I expected. I bought what I needed, not what I thought would impress others." I explained without judgment. That's been my approach to money my entire adult life. We set up at my dining table, spreading out the financial documents Howard had brought. The picture they painted was even worse than I'd anticipated. Their mortgage was underwater, meaning they owed more than the house was currently worth. 6 credit cards were maxed out with interest rates above 20%. Car loans, private school tuition, country club membership, and various luxury subscriptions created monthly expenses far exceeding what even Howard's substantial salary had covered. "How did it get this bad?" I asked gently, looking at total debt approaching $1.2 million. Howard ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from his childhood. "It happened gradually, then suddenly. We bought the house at the market peak, thinking my income would continue growing. The first few promotions came right on schedule, but then my career plateaued while our expenses kept increasing." "And Diane's spending habits?" I prompted carefully. "We both overspent," he admitted. "It wasn't just Diane. I wanted the right address, the right car, the right schools for the kids. In my industry, appearances matter. Or I thought they did." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "What about your own investments? Your retirement accounts?" Howard looked away, clearly embarrassed. "I've had to borrow against my 401k twice in the last 3 years. There's not much left." The financial advisor, with almost nothing, saved for his own retirement. The irony was painful for both of us. "What do you want to do, Howard? If money were no object, what solution would you choose?" "Honestly," he sighed deeply, "part of me wants you to just pay everything off so we can keep our life as it is. But I know that's not realistic or fair to you." I appreciated his self-awareness. "And the more practical part of you. We need to downsize dramatically. Sell the house even at a loss. Move somewhere much more affordable. Pull the kids from private school." He looked genuinely pained at this last part. "I just hate what this will do to them. They don't deserve to have their lives turned upside down because of our mistakes. Change is hard at any age," I acknowledged. "But children are resilient, especially when surrounded by love and security. Material things aren't what make them feel safe." Over the next 3 hours, we outlined a complete financial restructuring plan. Howard would work with the bank to negotiate a short sale of their house. They would move to a rental property, initially giving them time to rebuild some financial stability before considering another home purchase. The luxury cars would be sold and replaced with reliable used vehicles. The country club membership, housekeeping service, and other non-essential expenses would be eliminated immediately. I'd like to help in specific ways, I told him once the practical plan was established. Not by paying off debts that would just enable the same behavior to continue, but by creating a foundation for your family's future financial health. I outlined my proposal. I would establish education funds for Jessica and Tyler that could only be used for their schooling, from primary through college. This would ensure that regardless of their parents' financial situation, the children's education would be secure. I'll also provide a one-time payment to help with the difference between your mortgage and the short sale price. I continued, that will prevent you from carrying that debt forward. But the credit card debt is something you and Diane need to work through yourselves. I can recommend an excellent nonprofit credit counseling service that has helped many families in similar situations. Howard nodded, looking both relieved and chastened. That's more than fair, Mom. More than we deserve after how we treated you. This isn't about deserving, I said firmly. It's about family and about teaching the right lessons going forward, which brings me to my conditions. Conditions, he echoed. Yes, my financial help comes with requirements. First, you and Diane need to complete a financial literacy course. I'll pay for it, but you both must attend every session. Second, you need to be completely honest with Jessica and Tyler about what's happening and why in age-appropriate ways. They need to understand that this isn't a random disaster, but the result of specific financial choices. Howard winced, but nodded. What else? You'll need to create a realistic budget and stick to it. I want monthly updates for the first year to help keep you accountable. And finally, once you're back on your feet, I want you to commit to regular family financial discussions. No more secrets, no more pretending to be wealthier than you are. That all sounds reasonable, Howard agreed. But what about Diane? She's not here to agree to these terms. That's between you and your wife, I said. But my help is contingent on both of you participating. This has to be a family reset, not just your problem to solve alone. By the end of our meeting, we had a comprehensive plan and a new understanding between us. As Howard prepared to leave, he paused by the door. I still can't believe you managed to save so much on a teacher's salary, he said, shaking his head. All those years, I thought I was the financial expert in the family. Different kinds of expertise, I suggested. You understand complex financial products and markets. I understand the power of consistent habits and compound growth over time. I should have listened to you more, he admitted. And perhaps I should have been more open with you, I acknowledged. But we can't change the past. We can only move forward with better understanding. The following weeks were challenging for Howard's family. Telling the children about their financial situation and upcoming changes was particularly difficult. Howard later told me that 10-year-old Jessica had cried about leaving her friends and school, while 7-year-old Tyler was mostly concerned about keeping his favorite toys. Diane's reaction was more complicated. Initially, she was angry, blaming Howard for the financial collapse and me for attaching controlling conditions to my help. She refused to attend the first financial literacy class, sending Howard alone. But after a week of house hunting in their new, drastically reduced price range, reality began to sink in. By the second class, she joined Howard, though her participation was reportedly minimal. The house sold for significantly less than they had paid, but with my contribution to cover part of the shortfall, they were able to walk away without crushing mortgage debt following them. They found a 3-bedroom apartment in a middle-class suburb, less prestigious than Lake Forest, but safe and with decent schools. The dramatic downsizing meant selling or storing much of their furniture and possessions, a painful but ultimately clarifying process. Through it all, I maintained a supportive but firm position. I helped with childcare during the move, purchased some new furniture appropriate for their smaller space, and made their apartment cozy with thoughtful touches. But I stood firm on my conditions, requiring documentation of their budget adherence and financial counseling attendance before releasing funds for the children's education accounts. 3 months after our initial cafe meeting, Howard secured a new position. The salary was 30% lower than his previous job, but with their reduced expenses, it was sufficient to begin rebuilding their financial foundation. More importantly, the job required fewer evening events and weekend work, giving him more time with his family. 6 months into their financial recovery, Howard, Diane, and the children came to my condo for dinner the first time. We had gathered as a family since the painful argument that had driven us apart. The atmosphere was initially awkward, with Diane still somewhat reserved toward me. But the children's excitement at exploring my new home broke the ice, and by dessert, conversation was flowing more naturally. As the children played in the guest room I had set up especially for their visits, Howard, Diane, and I sat on the balcony with coffee. "I want to thank you," Diane said suddenly, surprising both Howard and me. "Not just for the financial help, but for the wake-up call. I've spent most of my adult life trying to keep up with people who probably couldn't afford their lifestyles either." Her honesty was unexpected and welcome. "It's a common trap," I said. "Our society encourages spending and displays of wealth, not saving and financial prudence. I always thought people who lived below their means were either poor or miserly," she admitted. "I never considered it could be a deliberate choice that led to actual wealth. Most real wealth doesn't look like wealth from the outside," I told her. "It's not flashy cars and designer labels. It's investment accounts and reasonable mortgages and freedom from financial stress." Howard joined the conversation. "We're teaching the kids different values now. Jessica has a savings account for the first time, and she's actually excited about watching it grow. Tyler told his friend that his grandma is rich, but you'd never know it because you're too smart to waste money," Diane added with a small smile. "I think he's getting the message." We all laughed, and in that moment, I felt a healing taking place. Not just between Howard and me, or even between Diane and me, but a healing of our family's relationship with money and with each other. The painful revelation of my hidden fortune had ultimately led to greater honesty, understanding, and respect. As they prepared to leave that evening, Howard hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry it took a financial disaster for me to appreciate your wisdom, Mom. I was so busy chasing the appearance of success that I missed the real thing right in front of me." "We all have different lessons to learn in life," I told him. "I'm just grateful that we have the chance to learn them together now." That night, after they had gone, I sat on my balcony looking at the city lights and reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The pain of being kicked out of Howard's home had led ultimately to a more authentic relationship with my son and his family. My hidden fortune, built through decades of consistent, patient investing, had provided not just financial security for me, but a safety net and learning opportunity for the next generation. I thought of all the young teachers I had mentored over the years, many of whom had asked for financial advice. Live below your means and invest the difference. I had always told them, time and compound growth will do the rest. Some had listened, others hadn't. Howard had needed to learn the hard way, but he was finally understanding the principles that had guided my life. True wealth I realized wasn't just about the numbers in my investment accounts. It was about the freedom to live authentically, to help others when needed, and to pass on values that would serve the next generation well. By hiding my financial success for so long, I had missed opportunities to teach by example. Now, through painful but honest reconciliation, those opportunities were being reclaimed. As I watched the stars appear above the city skyline, I felt profound gratitude for second chances and the wisdom that comes from facing difficult truths. The fortune I had hidden for so long was finally serving its highest purpose, bringing my family back together on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and shared values about what truly matters in life. Has your family ever experienced a financial misunderstanding that led to conflict? How did you resolve it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and reconciliation. And remember, true wealth isn't about what you have, but about the security and freedom to live according to your values. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you wisdom and peace on your own financial journey.